Hey you, hello friend, welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I would love it if you would join the Brat Pack by subscribing and clicking that bell, ringing that bell, dinging that bell. I put out new videos every week, both true crime and beauty related, and I would love to hang out with you. Wow, 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 my lips are so dry. So in contrast to my obvious uppity high energy intro and just overall vibe that I have today, today's video is going to be a sad one. They're all sad ones. If I'm honest, we're talking true crime. It's never a happy story, but this one is particularly sad and disappointing because you'll see, you'll hear, you'll know, but we're going to be discussing the senseless rape and murder of Brandon Teena. I want to note right off the bat that this story we're going to be talking about a trans man. Brandon Teena was born biologically female, and in a lot of the documentaries and articles and just doing my research, I see a lot of people refer to Brandon as a she or her or as Teena, but I am going to be referring to Brandon as a he and a him and as Brandon because that is the way Brandon wanted to identify. That is how Brandon saw himself, and that is who Brandon was and who we're going to be discussing. So in respect to him, I'm going to be referring to him as him. And I'd also like to add that I don't think that I am as versed in all of the terminology as maybe I should be as a human being existing in the world, but just know that if I get anything wrong, it is simply a lack of information and not disrespect, because I have nothing but love for every single person. I mean, unless you suck. You know what I mean? So just know that it's coming all from a place of love and acceptance, and if it's anything comes off incorrect, it's just a lack of information and not me being a dick, because I'd like to think that I'm not a dick. Okay, so now before we get into the story, just in case you don't know about it, though I feel like a lot of people do, but in case you don't, just know we're going to be discussing a really, really horrible hate crime that involves sexual assault, and it's pretty gnarly and it's pretty messed up, so viewer discretion and all of that. So Brandon Teena was a trans male that was born December 12th, 1972, making him a Sagittarius, and he was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. And Brandon was given the birth name of Teena Renee Brandon. Brandon was raised by a single mother named Joanne Brandon alongside his older sister, Tammy Brandon, and his father, unfortunately, was killed in a car accident months before he was even born. So Brandon realized from a very young age that he was different. He rejected traditionally female gender roles and started dressing in male clothing and dating exclusively women as young as adolescence. He started really young. He knew who he was, and he started adopting it right away. Brandon would say later in life, when he was discussing why he dressed the way he did and why he dated women, he would say that he was suffering from a sexual identity crisis. And I honestly think part of the lack of understanding in this case and the lack of acceptance has to do with the time and the place that this is happening, because of course right now in this day and age, being transgender is much better understood and accepted than it was in the 90s in Nebraska, where this story takes place. Though we're still not as good as we could be, but at least we're headed in the right direction. We're a lot better off than we were then. But when Brandon was growing up in the 80s and 90s in Nebraska, it wasn't as understood or accepted. And unfortunately, Brandon's choice to live his life bravely and openly with his preferred pronouns in the way that he wanted to be and identifying in who he felt like he was, it inevitably led to a series of vicious hate crimes that inevitably led to his death. So understandably, growing up was difficult for Brandon. I mean, with everything else going on and being raised by a single mom, not being able to be who he was and be accepted, he was a little bit challenging. He was known as a troubled child, a problem child, and he was actually expelled from high school his senior year, right before graduation, after he started missing classes and failing his classes in general. Please ignore this. It's not going anywhere. Taking up real estate on my face, paying no rent, freeloading. So after being expelled, Brandon started to essentially support himself financially, take responsibility for himself in that way. But he did this by committing petty crimes and taking odd jobs, but every job he took, he presented himself as a man. So Brandon had many girlfriends growing up, and for his reasons, which I know some people will probably have something to say about this, but Brandon chose not to tell them that he was trans and that he was still, technically speaking, biologically female. And the girls never questioned it based on the way that Brandon presented himself and the way that he looked. Everyone who was interviewed that I saw who had been Brandon's girlfriends or just girls that he casually dated had nothing but good things to say about Brandon. He was described as the perfect boyfriend. He was attentive and caring and just knew exactly how to please a woman. Brandon was actually even engaged to a girl at the time. Her name was Gina, and she was just like this really pretty girl named Gina. And Brandon had her name tattooed on one of his biceps, just a little Gina. And initially, Gina says she didn't know that Brandon was transgender, but a while after dating, I mean, they were serious, she did find out. And initially, she was confused. She would say to Brandon that they were in a gay relationship, and Brandon would get really upset saying that that wasn't the case because he was a man and she was a woman, so it wasn't a gay relationship. But, you know, Gina, she didn't understand how that was true considering he hadn't had the surgery and he was still physically female. So it was a complicated situation, especially with a lack of information. Because of the time that this was happening, but the couple stayed together anyway for a while. But unfortunately, the relationship didn't end up lasting because Brandon, as I said before, committed petty crimes, and one of these things that Brandon did was he stole money, he forged checks, and he purchased Gina an engagement ring, but when Gina looked into the engagement ring, she found that he had actually taken her debit card or credit card to buy the ring. So he initially used her money to buy her own ring. So she's like, I bought my own ring. And the two argued about this and he denied it. And she's like, bro, I know you did. And finally he admitted it, but rightfully upset, Gina did end the engagement. So after growing up in his hometown and having everyone there, because it was a small area, know his backstory, not being able to openly be himself without somebody, you know, being like, well, that's, you know, not the case because I know the case. And in addition, he had several convictions for check fraud, which landed Brandon on probation. He decided that he wanted to get away from all of it and start anew. He needed a change. He wanted to go somewhere where nobody knew his name. So, at 20 years old, in November of 1993, Brandon decided to head out on his own. So he left his home in Lincoln, Nebraska to hopefully start a new life in a new place and have a better existence being himself. New beginnings, all that. So, Brandon headed to the Falls City area of Nebraska, where he moved in with a single mother by the name of Lisa Lambert. Lisa had a young toddler son named Tanner, and it was unclear to me in doing my research if Brandon knew Lisa ahead of time and they arranged for him to move in with her, or if he just kind of went there and drifted a bit and then met her and was able to charm her and easily be able to move in because all of this happened so quickly. But either way, he moved in with Lisa. And it's also unclear if these two had a romantic relationship. There are rumors that they did, but that doesn't mean that it is true. All we know for sure is that Brandon moved in and stayed with Lisa. And while living with Lisa, Brandon met and started quickly dating a 18-year-old girl by the name of Lana Tisdale. When they met, it was early in the month of December of 1993, and the relationship was quick and the two were instantly inseparable. As is common when you get into a relationship, when Brandon and Lana started dating, Brandon got close with Lana's friends. You know, all the people she kept in her close circle, he hung out with and he became friends with as well, as, you know, as happens. Among the friends that Brandon became close with, that Lana was friends with, were two men who were both heavy drinkers with criminal records, one being named John Lauder and the other being named Marvin, or Tom as he went by Neeson. But we're just gonna call him Tom because that's how he's referred to always. Unfortunately, not much is known about the friendship between Brandon and these two men, and that's likely because everything in this case happened so quickly. Brandon left home in November, started dating Lana in early December of 1993, and would unfortunately, tragically, and ridiculously have his life ended before the end of December. It was December 31st. So all of this happened in less than a month. I'm gonna quickly throw on some brows, so 1 second. So it seemed that, unfortunately, moving to a new area and trying to start anew did not mitigate Brandon's habit of forging checks, and he was again arrested for check fraud while in the Falls City area. And unfortunately, this is when Brandon's birth name of Teena Brandon and his biological sex became known to the people in his life in Falls City. Lana had gone to the jail to bail Brandon out, where he had been being held in the female section of the jail, and that is when she found out. She did still bail him out though on December 22nd, and in Brandon being arrested, his information was also put into the local newspaper, where the rest of the people in the area were able to read Brandon's true name and true sex, as they put it, which, you know, but that's what happened. So quickly, the friends that Brandon had made in Falls City, they started to find out the secrets that Brandon had kept from them, and they started to get upset. It's honestly so sad, and I feel so bad for Brandon to have to go through this, because not only, I don't know, it just makes me feel bad. Lana, the girl he was dating, her mother confronted Brandon and shoved him into a dresser and demanded to know the truth from him. Michelle Lauder, who was John Lauder's sister and Lana's best friend, so had become Brandon's good friend, was super pissed off and told Lana that Brandon needed to get out of town, that he didn't need to be there anymore, that she wanted him to leave. And she was just pissed, and she said that she wasn't just angry, but that she was also worried as to what would happen to Brandon if he chose to stay. Which, apparently, she had some idea of how her brother was, so there's that. Brandon wrote Lana a letter saying that he didn't want to hurt her, but he wanted to leave, which is so sad that he didn't get a chance to. He said that he was sad that he couldn't be accepted and he just wanted to leave. But he didn't leave, and sadly, he should have. I go back and forth because on one hand, he shouldn't have to run away and hide because these small-minded bigots can't deal with the fact that he is who he is, and he shouldn't let them chase him out of town. But I wish that he had, because then he would still be alive today. Well, so John Lauder and Tom Neeson, like all of Brandon's other friends, had learned that Brandon was transgender. And from learning, they became enraged and obsessed with Brandon. They wanted to show Lana that it was true. I don't know if she had been like denying that Brandon was transgender or what, but they wanted to show Lana that it was true and show that Brandon was still biologically female. So they invited Brandon to a party on Christmas Eve. And while at the party, the two men, John Lauder and Tom Neeson, grabbed Brandon and forced him into a bathroom. And while in the bathroom, they started to rip off Brandon's clothes. One of the men stood behind Brandon and held his arms above his head. I believe that was Tom. And the other man pulled Brandon's pants and underwear down to his ankles, exposing his private body to Lana and to other party guests. Now this part I don't understand, and I don't think I ever will, but Brandon didn't leave, and I'm not sure why, but he stayed at that house after this assault that night. And in the early morning hours following the party, Tom and John went up to Brandon and said that they needed to talk to him, where they then took him into the bathroom again and started to beat him. One held the door, I believe, again, that was Tom, where John then proceeded to punch Brandon twice in the head and kick him in the ribs while he was down. He then picked Brandon up off the ground by his jacket that he was wearing and dragged him out to the car outside. The two men then forced Brandon into the back seat of their car and kidnapped Brandon, driving out to a remote area of Humboldt County. While there, Tom told Brandon that he could either make the situation hard on himself and get the shit beat out of him, or he could make it easy on himself, but either way he was going to be raped. The two men then took turns raping Brandon in the backseat of their car. Brandon was a virgin. After returning back to the house that the party had taken place at, Brandon was able to escape by sneaking out of a window, and he fled to Lana's house where he told her what happened. Initially, Brandon was resistant to the idea of reporting the assault because the men, had told him that if he had, they would kill him. But after telling Lana and Lana's mother, I believe, they convinced him that he should report the assault. So Brandon did report what happened, and a rape kit was taken. Brandon was questioned about the assault. Well, it was supposed to be Brandon being questioned, but it turned into more Brandon being interrogated by an officer named Charles Laux, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's Laux. And the way this officer questioned Brandon was honestly disgusting. If you've never read the transcripts or heard the interview, I would like to say you should, but it's also incredibly upsetting to hear. The questions he asked were just so inappropriate. For example, he asked, so when the men, I keep saying boys, these were men. So when the men had you in the bathroom and took off your pants and realized you were a girl, did they fondle you any? And Brandon said no. And he said, oh, that's strange, don't you think? Don't you think that if they had seen that you were a woman, they would have stuck some fingers in you? It was something along those lines, and it's so gross. It's so gross. And then this is a part that I wanted to read to you from the interview also. I wrote this part down, so give me a second. So, when he is interviewing Brandon about him being raped by these men, he asked Brandon, why do you go around kissing girls being as that you're a girl yourself? And Brandon says, I haven't the slightest idea. I have a sexual identity crisis. Laux. The girls that don't know about you think you're a guy. You go around kissing them? And Brandon rightfully says, what does this have to do with what happened last night? Where Laux says, I'm trying to get some answers so I know exactly what's going on. Yeah, Laux, what exactly does that line of questioning have to do with Brandon being raped? Dick. So even though Brandon reported his assault and the rape kit did show that there was a sign of rape, John Lauder and Tom Neeson were not arrested. Instead, they were simply called in for questioning on December 28th, but then they were allowed to leave due to a lack of evidence, giving these men enough time to put together and execute their planned murder. So, after Brandon reported the assault, Lana's mother, you remember Lana's mother, the one who confronted Brandon and pushed him into a dresser just because she was a concerned mother. That's what she said in her interview. Anyway, she went over to visit John Lauder and Tom Neeson, and she confronted them and asked them if they had done what Brandon said they had done, because she didn't believe Brandon, and the two said no. Where she proceeded to say, well, Brandon's reported it, so if you did do anything, you might want to clean up any evidence. She admitted to saying this. And at that point, that is when Tom went to the kitchen and got a pan of soapy water and a rag and started to clean up. And this is when she believed Brandon. This lady is an asshole. I'm sorry. That is such a... Who does that? I don't know. But, like, this lady's an asshole, and I maintain that this lady's an asshole. So angry that Brandon had gone to the police, angry that Brandon had duped them in the first place, and worried that Brandon would press charges and get them arrested on December 31st in the early morning hours. I believe it was around like 1 a.m. John Lauder and Tom Neeson got in their car and headed over to where Brandon was staying. This was back at Lisa Lambert's home, which was about 30 miles away from where the men were. And what I read online, but I wasn't able to confirm if it was true, it's just something that was floating around in a few articles, was that the men had actually been looking for Brandon for a couple of days and weren't sure where he was. So they had gone to Lana to ask Lana where he was, and Lana's mother had told them that Brandon was at Lisa's. I don't know if that's accurate, but that is what is being said, and given what she's admitted to, it's not that out of the realm of possibilities for me to believe that she would do that. But they head over to the isolated home where Lisa Lambert, Lisa's toddler son Tanner, Brandon, and a friend of Lisa's family, Phillip Devine, were all staying. Lisa, who is 23, and Phillip, who is 22, were both shot twice. I couldn't tell online where exactly in the body Phillip had been shot. I did look at the crime scene photos and it looked to be in his abdomen. Lisa, I know, was shot once in the stomach and once through her eye. And Brandon was shot once, I believe, and it was right under the chin is where the bullet entered. Tom Neeson, admits that after shooting Brandon, or after Brandon was shot, he grabbed a knife and stabbed Brandon in the stomach to ensure that he was dead. Brandon was murdered on December 31st, 1993, just a little over a week after his 21st birthday. So on December 31st, Lisa's mother, worried because Lisa hadn't shown up at work, went over to the house to check on her daughter and her grandson. Upon arrival, she started knocking on the door but received no answer, but she could hear her grandson Tanner crying from within. And when Lisa did not console Tanner and she considered, and Tanner continued to cry, Lisa's mother became worried and at that point entered the apartment, where she found the bodies and retrieved the baby, who had been left in that house with those dead bodies all night. So the police at least had evidence tying Tom to the crime scene, but the evidence they had on John Lauder was weak, and since the police wanted to ensure that they could get a conviction of both men, they actually made a deal with Tom Neeson, which he did accept, and in this deal, the death penalty was taken off the table for Tom, and in exchange, he would testify against John Lauder. Due to Tom Neeson's testimony, John Lauder was given the death penalty when he was tried in 1996, and this was following Tom Neeson's trial, which happened first in 1995, where he was given 3 life sentences for the murders. In 2007, Tom Neeson recanted his testimony that he had given at John Lauder's trial. He said that he felt bad knowing that a man was on death row due to his lies, and admitted that it wasn't John Lauder who had been the trigger man at the murders, that Tom himself had actually been the one who shot all the bullets that killed Brandon, Lisa, and Phillip. He said that John Lauder was just his accomplice. And due to this, John Lauder was trying to get a new trial due to this new information, but even if he got a new trial, he likely wouldn't be released from prison or anything like that, because due to the state law in Nebraska, if you are complicit in a crime, you can then be convicted of that crime. So since he was complicit to the murder of these 3 people, he could still be considered guilty of murdering them himself. So he wouldn't get out, but if he got a new trial, he could possibly get off death row. And even in Tom Neeson's recanted new confession, he still says that John Lauder was there to help him. They planned the murders together, and that John Lauder was actually at the crime scene. So he still was heavily involved. He just may not have been the one who actually pulled the trigger, which I don't know. I think I kind of actually believe that, because in all the interviews I saw, everybody who knew them, Tom seemed to be more of the instigating type, the more of the leader. John seemed to be more of a follower, and he said to have a pretty low IQ, and so that he may not have been capable of planning something like this, but would easily go along, if you know what I mean. But as of 2018, John Lauder's most recent appeal was rejected, so he has not got his new trial. Brandon's mother, Joanne, did file a civil suit against the Richardson County and actually Sheriff Locks himself, individually. Richardson County was found negligent in not arresting the two men and not providing Brandon with protective custody and making sure that Brandon was safe after reporting his assault. But they did find that Charles Locks was not guilty of intentionally inflicting emotional distress. The last I read, Joanne was awarded around $17,000 for the wrongful death suit. Brandon's murder did initially make headlines as one of the most heinous hate crimes in America at the time, but it became popularized nationwide when Brandon's story was made into a movie, which you may have seen. It's called Boys Don't Cry, and it starred Hilary Swank, and that's actually where I first learned about this case at all. There's also a book called All She Wanted. I haven't read that. My mom owns it. I haven't got a chance to read it, but another resource that you could look to if you want to learn more about the case. It frustrates me that the sheriff wasn't found to be more accountable, to be honest. It seemed to me that he was looking more for a way to excuse Brandon's rapist than to help Brandon himself, you know? That's just how it felt. It felt like he was more interested in like what the reasoning was that these men would want to rape Brandon than to actually help somebody who had just been raped. I can't imagine being raped and then having an officer ask me the questions that Brandon was asked. It's like being violated all over again, but by the person who's supposed to be there to protect and serve you. If he had listened to Brandon and arrested John Lauder and Tom Neeson, Brandon would still be alive today. And I hope that that weighs on him, because it should. It was preventable and it was avoidable, and he is responsible, at least partially. He didn't do it, but he allowed it to happen by being inactive and insensitive, because this beautiful boy just wanted to live his life and have his existence, acknowledged and affirmed and respected. But his life was cut short at only 21 years old, and in such a brutal way. The last week of Brandon's life, he was outed, he was ridiculed, he was beaten, he was raped, and then he was abused by the exact people that we expect to protect and to serve us. It almost seems like maybe the police shouldn't be the ones who are dealing with rape victims. I don't know, just a thought. But that is the terribly sad story of the rape and murder of Brandon Teena. If you're interested in this case and you haven't seen the documentary, it's called The Brandon Teena Story, I believe. I would suggest it. I watched it on Tubi. It's one of the many free streaming platforms that I found during quarantine. This isn't like sponsored or anything. I'm just letting you know, because in staying home, I needed to find new ways to watch things, and Tubi is just one of those ones. Like if you have a smart TV or a Fire Stick or anything, you can download the app, and there's a lot of free stuff on there that's not on like Netflix or Hulu. So that's where I watched the documentary, and I know it's still there because I just watched it. And if you want to watch the movie Boys Don't Cry, I know you can rent it on Amazon for like $3. I don't know if you need Amazon Prime for that, but either way, those are the two ways that I know that you could access the resources that I think would be valuable for you to watch. Because me telling a story, I'm giving you as much information as I can, as much as I feel is relevant, but there's something very different about hearing. You can hear the interview between Brandon and the officer yourself. You can hear interviews directly from his rapist and murderer's mouths themselves and the people who actually knew Brandon, and of course that is valuable in itself. So anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope it was informative and made sense, and of course I hope that you enjoyed it. Of course, make sure to let me know of any cases you'd like to see me cover down below. I have an ongoing list, but I'd love to hear your ideas because I know you're full of good ideas. I know it. I know it. Of course, make sure to join the Brat Pack and hang out with us by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out new videos every week and I would love to hang out with you. And with that said, thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else on the internet. You're tight, this is tight, and I hope to see you in my next video.